Welcome to Adventures in Dentures. In our first episode, we're going to show you how to pour, trim, and articulate dental models. Let's get started. We've now moved over to the denture processing area. You'll see I have impressions here. A full denture lower with attachments, and a partial denture. These are impressions received from the dentist taken on the patient. They've been disinfected and ready for us to handle. We still do want to wear gloves, and it's important that during your studies that you take an OSHA certified course in disinfection and laboratory procedure. This is our impression for a partial denture. You see we have teeth in here as well as an edentulous ridge. What we're going to do is pour in green dye stone. It's important to use a hard stone when working on partial frames. There's going to be a lot of adding and taking away from this model, and it'll easily scratch if you don't use a hard dye stone. First, we'll spray a lubricant in here since this is a rubber-based impression, and blow off any excess. Now we're ready to get our plaster and stone mixed. Please follow any instructions you get on your model stones. It's important to follow the manufacturer's guidelines. We have the water in the mixing jar first, then we add the stone. We're going to hand spatulate before we move over to our power mixer. All right, let's assemble our mixer, locking it securely. This hose creates the vacuum in our mix. Place it in here, and this automatically turns on. The hose is pulling any excess oxygen out of the stone, so we have a porous-free model. All right, we're going to move to the vibrating pad. We're going to open our chamber. And we're vibrating our mix, whatever's left over, into the jar so we don't waste anything. Place it on a clean paper towel. There's not much air coming out of here because it was all taken up by our vacuum mixer. Take a little bit on your spatula and watch it flow onto your model, starting in one corner and working around. It should fill every individual tooth. You don't want it to go in there quickly because it might go over the top of the tooth and trap air. Watch it go into every individual tooth as it's coming around. All right. Now we can turn off the vibrator since we've filled the entire impression. Okay, we're going to take our excess material now and just fill in the rest of the impression, taking up to the height of the rolls being the surrounding edges of the border. And we're going to move this over to our paper towel and just fill it in a little bit more. Okay. Now we have it on a paper towel. We're just going to slide a little bit more material on here. Now, your setting time will be affected by your room temperature, the humidity. You find that if you were working in a lab on a rainy day and your windows were open with all the moisture in the air, it might take a very long time for this model to set up. But if you're in a dry room, moderate temperature, it should last about 12 to 15 minutes, which is a standard setting time for most dye stones. Let's let this set a while and we'll pour up the rest of our models. All right, we see we have an attachment denture here. So before we pour the model, we're going to place in our grommets, lab analogs. They're going to snap right into position and they'll hold there very well while we're pouring. Okay. We're going to again add our water to the bowl. We know we have about a 1 to 3 mixing ratio. We're going to scoop in the right amount of stone to our water. So we have 3 models to pour here. We want to make sure we have a good amount. Okay, I'm going to pause, pour a little excess water back off, and this is ready to mix. Okay, we're going to stir this together. You want it thoroughly mixed, no dry powder left. Go around the edge of the bowls, make sure there's nothing dry there, and spatulate vigorously. It's not like using the power mixer, but this stone doesn't require that type of vacuum and high-speed mixing. You want these models to be a little softer because these are going to be invested, and when we have to separate this from a hard acrylic denture, you want the stone to break, not the denture. Okay, we're going to vibrate the bubbles out of here. See them rise to the top. You squeeze the bowl a little bit, it helps to break up the bubbles. You get as much porosity out of here as you can to make for a better model. If there's air bubbles in there, it's going to be an extremely weak model. We don't want that. Just continue, you have plenty of working time with the stone. Very little coming up now, and it's just about ready to pour into our impressions. And there's no teeth here, so we can pour this in fairly quickly. And again, with the lower, we're going to start around the back edge. And trap our attachments, and we're ready to fill these in. Alright, we want to continue to fill these impressions. Make sure you cover all the rolls again, and you don't want to lock the stone around the edges of the tray. It would be very difficult to separate. They're completely filled. We're going to add a little on top of our die stone model. Now, this is where you'll see a big difference in lab poured models as opposed to some of the doctor's poured models. We're going to put our base down. I don't like to box the models. I like to put a nice solid base of stone out for them. Alright. A little more on top. Now for the upper, we're just going to flip that down on top. Make sure it's nice and level. Lower, we want to create a little bit of a heel shape. Flatten the back, and a little more sharp towards the front. And when we flip that on here, it's critical not to let the stone come up and inside of that empty space. It's a false space where the tongue would be on a lower. You want to make sure that's completely cleaned out. It's going to help you when you're investing your models, when you're doing your setups, and you don't want to lock in this area to make it difficult to get the impression separated from the stone model. Again, the same with our partial lower model. We'll place it on top, make sure it's level, and make sure this area is completely cleaned out. Alright, we're going to clean up the sides. Brushing them around to make sure the rolls are completely filled, but you don't, again, want to cover over the impression tray. We're going to fill in the backs on the lower, give it a nice thick heel. Make sure it's filled in all around. And again, you can see how nice and clean it is in here. I've seen a lot of models come through the lab where it's very high up, and then that has to all be ground out in order to process that denture. Again, we're going to clean up in here. Add to the heel and blend. Take away any excess you don't need. You don't want to spend a lot of time at the model trimmer. And we're ready to let these set up and go trim the models. Now that our stone models have cured, we're going to separate the impression material. We'll do this by running it under water and prying from the back of the model. Allow the water to get underneath the impression material. It's going to act as a lubricant and make it easier to take your model off. When using the model trimmer, it's important to use all safety precautions. You can catch your fingers in the trimmer wheel, and a lot of debris is coming at your face, so it's important to wear a face mask and gloves when working when trimming models. The object of trimming the model is to get a flat base so it's level for articulation. You want to trim off all the rough edges, going into the area we would call the roll, but not trimming more than halfway into that area because that's your finish line for the final denture. Let's get started trimming. Make sure the model's flat. You want to make sure you don't trim any of the tissue away while you're getting the edges. It's very easy to do because it's tough to see in between the trimmer wheel and the model. Check to see where you've trimmed. If you need to get closer, but the ridge is in the way, you may have to angle the back of the model down in order to bring that back. You can see when we poured our lower that it was important to scrape away this middle area. Now we don't have a large lump in here that would have to be ground out by hand. It's important to see your retromolar pad and make sure you do not remove that. That gives a lower denture its stability. Now it's important to wash the model off and scrape off the rough edges on the outside. Just take the knife and bevel the edges. You're not cutting in deep, you're just taking off any sharp corners. You can cut yourself on a stone model. You just want to be very careful with it. Now your models are prepped, it's ready for articulation or for making your rims or trays. It's time to articulate our models. It's important to make sure the model is sealed together well. It's not going to come apart. If it starts coming apart while you're articulating, you have to stop, clean off your articulator, reseal the models, and start over. You want to check the height to make sure that you don't have too much clearance, but enough that you'll close the pin in the back of your articulator to make sure that you have enough space to open or close, depending whether the doctor wants to change the vertical dimension. There's two kinds of articulators here. The other one is magnetic, and it makes it very easy to remove the models from the articulator to work in your hands. These type of articulators don't have magnets, so we have to lubricate the models, which makes it easy to separate them from the mounting. I've already mixed up some plaster to get started. We want to make sure that our models are level and even inside the articulator. Not too much dimension to one side or the other. Close it down. Now we just want to smooth this off. We're going to level this off a little bit. Pull it forward to make a nice shape. Something's going to be nice and smooth to handle while you're working. Just going to trim around the edge and around the bottom. Take a little water, smooth this up. And that's how we articulate on a standard articulator. All right. Now to do this magnetic type of articulator, not too much different, but we don't need the paper underneath. Place our material on the bottom again. Add a little bit to our model. And again, we want to place that on there. Make sure we have enough vertical space. Close this down. Make sure that our model is level, centered. The midline that the doctor marked is at the center of the articulator. And again, we're just going to clean that up a little bit. Place some plaster on the top on the magnet. And again on the model. Close it down. You have to put some pressure on here, but you don't want to disarticulate your bite rims. Make sure they're still centered and level. Now I'm going to hold the articulator to clean the material off here a little easier. Okay. Again, we're going to take a little water, smooth this out. Make it nice and clean for presentation. Okay. When we're done here, we simply take it over to the sink, rinse off our articulators, make sure everything's neat and clean. But that's it. That's the basics for doing an articulation.